Ethan Carter had always been a man in motion, literally and figuratively. At 45 years old, he was a high-powered architect known for designing sleek skyscrapers that pierced the skyline of one of the busiest cities in the world. His days were a blur of meetings, deadlines, and late-night work sessions fueled by coffee and cigarettes. To those who knew him professionally, Ethan was a force to be reckoned with, sharp, driven, and relentless in his pursuit of perfection. But beneath the polished exterior lay cracks that only widened as the years passed. At home, Ethan's life wasn't much different from his professional one. He lived alone in a modern loft filled with minimalist furniture and stark white walls, a reflection of his meticulous but emotionally detached personality. Divorced for nearly a decade, he rarely saw his ex-wife Rachel or their teenage son Liam. When they did meet, it was often tense, a clash of unresolved grievances and unspoken apologies. Ethan justified his absence by telling himself he was providing for them financially, though deep down he knew money couldn't fill the void left by his neglect. Despite his success, or perhaps because of it, Ethan felt perpetually restless. The adrenaline rush of closing deals and completing projects kept him going. But it also masked an underlying emptiness. He hadn't taken a vacation in over 3 years, hadn't gone for a jog since college, and couldn't remember the last time he'd eaten a meal without checking his phone. Friends joked about how married he was to his job, but Ethan didn't mind. Work gave him purpose, or so he believed. It all came crashing down on a Tuesday morning, during what should have been just another routine meeting. The conference room buzzed with energy as Ethan led a presentation for a new client. Blueprints were spread across the table, laptops hummed quietly, and colleagues nodded approvingly as he outlined the design concept. Midway through explaining the structural integrity of the proposed building, Ethan paused. A sharp pain shot through his chest, radiating outward like wildfire. For a moment, he thought it was indigestion, probably from the greasy sandwich he grabbed earlier. But when the room began spinning and his vision blurred, panic set in. "Ethan, are you okay?" someone asked, their voice distant and muffled. He tried to respond, but the words caught in his throat. Before he could steady himself, darkness enveloped him, and he collapsed onto the floor. When Ethan regained consciousness, he found himself lying in a hospital bed, surrounded by sterile white walls and the faint beeping of machines monitoring his vitals. The fluorescent lights overhead cast harsh shadows, making everything feel surreal. His head throbbed, and his body ached as if he'd been hit by a truck. Beside him stood Dr. Patel, a no-nonsense oncologist with kind eyes and a clipboard clutched tightly in her hands. "Mr. Carter," she began gently, pulling up a chair. "You've had a cardiac event, likely triggered by extreme stress. While we're running tests to determine the full extent of your condition, I need to discuss something serious with you." Ethan's stomach dropped. "What is it?" Dr. Patel hesitated, choosing her words carefully. "We've identified several concerning abnormalities during our initial scans. Based on what we've seen so far, it appears you may have an aggressive form of cancer." The room seemed to tilt, and Ethan's breath hitched. "Cancer?" he repeated numbly, the word sounding foreign on his tongue. "Are you sure?" She nodded solemnly. "I'm afraid so. We'll need to confirm with further testing, but given the preliminary results, I won't sugarcoat this. Your prognosis isn't good." "How bad are we talking?" Ethan managed to ask, his voice barely above a whisper. Dr. Patel sighed, placing a hand on his arm. "Without immediate treatment, you might have weeks, maybe months at most. Even with chemotherapy, the odds aren't in your favor." Weeks, months. The words echoed in Ethan's mind like a death knell. He stared blankly at the ceiling, trying to process the enormity of what she was saying. How could this be happening? Just yesterday, he'd been arguing with a contractor about steel reinforcements. Last week, he'd celebrated landing a multi-million-dollar contract. And now he was staring into the abyss. "What happens next?" he finally asked, his voice cracking under the weight of despair. "We'll schedule a round of chemo as soon as possible," Dr. Patel replied. "But want to prepare you, it's going to be grueling. There's also palliative care if you decide not to pursue aggressive treatments." Palliative care. The phrase hung in the air like a dark cloud. Ethan didn't respond immediately, instead focusing on the rhythmic beeping of the heart monitor beside him. Each blip represented a second ticking away, reminding him of how fragile life truly was. The days following his diagnosis passed in a haze of disbelief and denial. Ethan checked himself out of the hospital against medical advice, unable to face the reality of his situation. Back at his loft, he wandered aimlessly from room to room, avoiding calls from Rachel and ignoring texts from colleagues asking when he'd return to work. He poured himself a glass of whiskey, then another, hoping alcohol would dull the ache gnawing at his insides. But no amount of liquor could silence the questions swirling in his mind. Why me? What did I do to deserve this? As the hours turned into days, anger gave way to despair. Ethan realized he had nothing to show for his decades of hard work. Not a happy family, not meaningful friendships, not even hobbies outside of architecture. His entire identity was tied to a career that suddenly felt meaningless. If he died tomorrow, who would mourn him? Who would remember him? One sleepless night, desperate for answers, or at least distraction, Ethan opened his laptop and began searching online for stories of people who'd beaten terminal illnesses. Most articles reiterated the bleak statistics Dr. Patel had shared, but buried among them was a forum thread titled Miracle Cures, Real Stories. Intrigued, Ethan clicked on it. Thread after thread chronicled tales of individuals defying medical odds through unconventional methods. Plant-based diets, meditation retreats, herbal supplements, even faith-based healing. Skeptical yet intrigued, Ethan scrolled until he stumbled upon a post from someone named Claire. She described a remote mountain retreat led by Dr. Maya Lin, a former oncologist turned advocate for integrative medicine. According to Claire, participants underwent rigorous programs combining physical, mental, and spiritual healing, and some walked away disease-free. Ethan scoffed initially. It sounded too good to be true, like something out of a self-help infomercial. Yet, as he read more testimonials, hope flickered within him, a tiny flame fighting to stay lit amidst the darkness. What did he have to lose? If conventional medicine offered little chance of survival, why not try something radical? Still, doubt lingered. What if it was all a scam? What if he wasted precious time chasing false promises? Determined to find clarity, Ethan reached out to Claire via the forum's messaging system. To his surprise, she responded almost immediately. "You have nothing to lose," she wrote, "and everything to gain." Her words resonated deeply. That night, Ethan made a decision. He would visit the retreat. Whether it saved his life or simply bought him a few more weeks, he owed it to himself and to Liam to fight. Booking the trip proved challenging. Located in a remote part of the country, accessible only by winding mountain roads, the retreat required a month-long commitment, a daunting prospect for someone accustomed to micromanaging every minute of his day. Worse still, when Ethan informed Rachel of his plans, she reacted with predictable skepticism. "This sounds insane, Ethan," she said bluntly over the phone. "What makes you think some hippy-dippy retreat can cure cancer?" "I don't know," Ethan admitted, rubbing his temples, "but have to try. Traditional medicine doesn't give me much hope, Rach." "And neither does this," she shot back. "You're throwing away valuable time you could spend with Liam." Guilt twisted in Ethan's gut. She was right. He'd missed so many milestones already. But what could he offer Liam if he didn't survive? Wouldn't it be better to leave behind memories of resilience rather than regret? "I'll make it up to him," Ethan promised softly. "I swear." Rachel sighed, relenting slightly. "Just be careful, okay? Don't let this place take advantage of you." With her reluctant blessing, Ethan packed his bags and boarded a flight to the mountains, leaving behind the city that had defined him for so long. As the plane ascended into the clouds, he gazed out the window, watching the urban sprawl shrink into insignificance below. For the first time in years, he felt a glimmer of something unfamiliar, possibility. Little did he know, the journey ahead would test not only his body but also his spirit, and ultimately reveal truths about himself he never dared to confront. The road to the retreat was as treacherous as it was breathtaking. Winding through dense forests and jagged cliffs, the narrow lane seemed to stretch endlessly, mirroring the turmoil brewing inside Ethan. Each twist and turn brought him closer to the unknown, a place where hope intertwined with skepticism, where desperation met determination. By the time the retreat came into view, nestled in a valley surrounded by towering peaks, Ethan felt both exhilarated and apprehensive. The retreat itself was unlike anything he'd imagined. A cluster of rustic cabins surrounded a central lodge, their wooden exteriors blending seamlessly with the natural landscape. Smoke curled lazily from stone chimneys, and the air carried the crisp scent of pine mingled with earthy undertones. Despite its serene beauty, there was an aura of mystery about the place, an unspoken promise that those who entered might leave forever changed. As Ethan stepped out of the car, a woman approached him with quiet grace. She introduced herself as Dr. Maya Lin, her voice calm yet commanding. Her appearance defied expectations. Rather than the stereotypical image of a reclusive healer, she exuded professionalism tempered by warmth. Her dark eyes held a depth that hinted at untold stories, and her handshake conveyed both strength and compassion. "Welcome, Ethan," she said softly, studying him with an intensity that made him feel simultaneously seen and vulnerable. "I'm glad you're here." Ethan nodded, unsure how to respond. He'd expected a sales pitch, or at least some reassurance, but Dr. Lin offered none. Instead, she handed him a schedule detailing the daily regimen: sunrise yoga, plant-based meals, meditation sessions, and group therapy. Each activity bore cryptic titles like Finding Stillness and Unearthing the Hidden Key. "This is intense," Ethan remarked, scanning the document skeptically. "You really think this will help?" Dr. Lin smiled faintly, her expression enigmatic. "Help isn't something we give, Ethan. It's something you find within yourself. We simply provide the tools." Her words unsettled him, though he couldn't pinpoint why. Was she implying he was responsible for his illness? Or worse, that his survival depended solely on his ability to endure grueling rituals? Whatever the case, he reminded himself why he'd come: to fight for his life, and resolved to keep an open mind. The first few days were brutal. Ethan struggled to adjust to the strict routine, which left little room for rest or reflection. Morning yoga sessions pushed his body to its limits, leaving him sore and irritable. Meals consisted of unfamiliar dishes, quinoa salads, kale smoothies, and herbal teas that tasted bland compared to the rich, salty foods he craved. Worst of all were the meditation exercises, during which participants sat silently for hours, focusing on their breath while intrusive thoughts swirled uncontrollably in Ethan's mind. "It's not working," he muttered one evening after a particularly frustrating session. "I don't see how any of this helps." Claire, the woman whose post had inspired him to come, overheard his complaint and chuckled knowingly. "It didn't work for me at first either," she admitted, joining him on the porch overlooking the valley. "But trust me, it gets better. You just have to stick with it." Ethan frowned, glancing at her skeptically. Claire appeared healthier than when he'd read her forum post. Her skin glowed, and her energy seemed boundless. But she'd also been at the retreat for months. Could he afford to wait that long? "What if it doesn't?" he challenged. "What if I'm wasting my time here?" Claire tilted her head thoughtfully. "Then at least you'll know you tried everything. But I think you'll find what you're looking for, not just physically, but emotionally too." Her words lingered in his mind long after their conversation ended. That night, unable to sleep, Ethan wandered outside, staring up at the star-studded sky. For the first time in years, he allowed himself to sit still without distractions. No phone buzzing, no emails demanding attention, no deadlines looming overhead. Slowly, ever so slowly, his racing thoughts began to calm. Breakthroughs came unexpectedly, often in moments of vulnerability. During a guided visualization exercise led by Dr. Lin, Ethan closed his eyes and followed her instructions to imagine walking along a familiar path. At first, nothing happened, just blankness. But then, vivid images began flooding his mind. He saw himself as a child, holding his father's hand as they strolled through their neighborhood park. His father's laughter echoed warmly, filling the silence between them. Then abruptly, the scene shifted. They were sitting in a hospital room, his father frail and hooked up to machines. Young Ethan clutched his father's hand tightly, tears streaming down his face as he begged him not to leave. When Ethan opened his eyes, he realized he was crying, not the silent tears of grief, but raw, uncontrollable sobs that racked his entire body. Around him, other participants remained focused on their own journeys, but Dr. Lin knelt beside him, placing a gentle hand on his shoulder. "It's okay," she whispered. "Let it out." For hours afterward, memories he'd buried resurfaced, one after another, each more painful than the last. He remembered the guilt he'd carried after his father's death, blaming himself for not being strong enough to save him. He recalled the arguments with Rachel, the missed birthdays and parent-teacher conferences, the promises he'd broken to Liam. All these years, he'd convinced himself that success could compensate for absence, but now he understood how hollow that belief truly was. That night, Ethan wrote in the journal Dr. Lin had provided, pouring his heart onto the pages. He wrote about his fears, his regrets, his longing for redemption. As dawn broke, he felt lighter, as though shedding decades of emotional weight had given him room to breathe again. Relationships formed gradually, deepening as participants shared their struggles openly. Ethan grew especially close to Marcus, a retired soldier battling PTSD, and Priya, a young mother diagnosed with a rare autoimmune disorder. Their stories resonated with him, reminding him that he wasn't alone in his pain. Together, they supported one another through difficult moments, celebrating small victories like completing a challenging hike or mastering a new breathing technique. One evening, gathered around a bonfire under a canopy of stars, Ethan listened as Marcus recounted his darkest days following military service. "I used to think I was invincible," Marcus confessed, his voice trembling. "But war changes you. It strips away everything until you're just empty. Coming here saved me, not because of the food or the yoga, but because I learned to forgive myself." Ethan nodded, recognizing echoes of his own journey in Marcus's words. Forgiveness, that was the key Dr. Lin kept hinting at. Not forgiveness from others, but from oneself. Could that really be the missing piece? By the end of the third week, subtle changes began manifesting. Ethan noticed improvements in his physical health. His energy levels increased, his appetite returned, and the persistent headaches that had plagued him since his diagnosis subsided. More importantly, he felt mentally clearer, as if layers of fog had lifted from his mind. Conversations flowed easier, laughter came naturally, and even the daunting prospect of facing Rachel and Liam didn't seem quite so insurmountable. During a private consultation with Dr. Lin, Ethan expressed his gratitude but voiced lingering doubts. "This is incredible," he admitted, gesturing to the surrounding landscape. "But what happens when I go back? How do I keep this momentum going?" Dr. Lin smiled knowingly. "The real work begins when you leave," she said. "Healing isn't confined to this place. It's a lifelong commitment. Remember what you've learned here. Nourish your body, nurture your spirit, and never stop seeking connection." Her advice struck a chord deep within Ethan. For the first time, he realized that healing wasn't about eradicating illness entirely. It was about reclaiming agency over his life, finding purpose beyond survival, and embracing joy despite uncertainty. On his final day at the retreat, Ethan stood atop a hill overlooking the valley, reflecting on how far he'd come. Weeks earlier, he'd arrived broken and defeated, clinging to fragile hope. Now, though the road ahead remained uncertain, he felt equipped to face whatever lay beyond. The scars of his past would always remain, but they no longer defined him. They shaped him, teaching resilience and humility. As he descended the hill, ready to return to the world he'd left behind, Ethan made a silent vow to share the lessons he'd learned, to mend fractured relationships, and to live fully, even if only for a little while longer. Because sometimes, the smallest spark of light can dispel the darkest shadows. Ethan's return to the city felt like stepping into another dimension, one where time moved faster, noise was constant, and chaos reigned supreme. The contrast between the serene mountain retreat and the bustling urban landscape was jarring. Horns blared, people rushed past without making eye contact, and towering skyscrapers loomed overhead, casting long shadows over crowded streets. For a moment, standing on the sidewalk outside his loft, Ethan wondered if he'd made a mistake leaving the retreat so soon. Could he really carry its lessons into this frenetic world? But then he remembered Dr. Lin's parting words. "The real work begins when you leave." Taking a deep breath, Ethan squared his shoulders and stepped inside, determined to honor her advice, and himself by living fully, even in uncertainty. Reconnecting with family. The first person Ethan reached out to was Liam. Their relationship had been strained for years, marked by missed opportunities and unspoken resentment. Ethan knew he couldn't undo the past, but he hoped to build something new, a foundation rooted in honesty and effort rather than excuses. He invited Liam to dinner, choosing a cozy cafe near the park where they used to play catch when Liam was younger. The boy, now a teenager navigating the complexities of adolescence, arrived reluctantly, his expression guarded. They sat across from each other in awkward silence until Ethan finally broke it. "I want to start by saying I'm sorry," he began, his voice steady despite the lump in his throat. "I haven't been the dad you deserve, and that's on me. But I'm here now, and I'd like to change that, if you'll let me." Liam stared at him, clearly caught off guard. For a moment, Ethan feared he'd pushed too hard too soon. Then slowly, Liam nodded. "Okay," he said softly, "we can try." It wasn't much, but it was a start. Over the weeks that followed, Ethan made an effort to be present, not just physically, but emotionally. He attended Liam's soccer games, helped him with homework, and listened intently when he talked about school or friends. Small gestures, perhaps, but they added up, bridging the gap between them one conversation at a time. Reconnecting with Rachel proved more challenging. She greeted Ethan's attempts at reconciliation with skepticism, accusing him of using his illness as an excuse to reinsert himself into their lives. "What happens when you get better?" she demanded during one heated argument. "Will you disappear again?" Her question stung because it was valid. Ethan couldn't promise he wouldn't revert to old habits, but he could commit to trying. "I don't know what the future holds," he admitted, "but I do know I want to be part of your lives. Not because I have to, but because I need to." Rachel softened slightly, though her trust remained cautious. Still, she agreed to meet for coffee occasionally, creating space for tentative conversations that hinted at healing. Sharing the lessons. As Ethan rebuilt his relationships, he also turned his attention outward, eager to share the transformative practices he'd adopted at the retreat. He started small, organizing free workshops in community centers and libraries. Each session focused on practical tools, mindfulness techniques, nutritional tips, and strategies for managing stress. To his surprise, attendance grew rapidly, drawing participants from all walks of life: young professionals battling burnout, retirees seeking purpose, caregivers overwhelmed by responsibility. One evening, after a particularly engaging workshop, a woman approached Ethan with tears in her eyes. "Thank you," she whispered. "I didn't think anyone understood what I was going through. But hearing your story, it gave me hope." Her gratitude fueled Ethan's resolve. If these simple practices could help strangers, imagine what they might achieve on a larger scale. Inspired, he began advocating for broader systemic changes, speaking at conferences, and writing op-eds about the importance of integrating mental and emotional health into traditional healthcare models. However, not everyone welcomed his message. Critics dismissed his approach as pseudoscience, accusing him of promoting dangerous alternatives to proven medical treatments. Some doctors publicly criticized him, warning patients against abandoning conventional therapies in favor of untested methods. Even colleagues who once admired Ethan's professional achievements now viewed him with suspicion, questioning whether his recovery was genuine or merely a statistical anomaly. The backlash stung, but Ethan refused to let it deter him. Instead, he leaned on the support of those who believed in his mission, including Claire, Marcus, and Priya, who joined him remotely via video calls to share their own stories. Together, they formed a network of advocates determined to challenge outdated paradigms and empower individuals to take charge of their well-being. Uncovering secrets. Amidst his growing activism, Ethan couldn't shake lingering questions about Dr. Maya Lin. Who was she really? And why had she chosen such a secluded location for her retreat? Determined to find answers, he spent late nights researching her background, piecing together fragments of information hidden beneath layers of obscurity. What he discovered shocked him. Decades earlier, Dr. Lin had been a rising star in oncology, known for pioneering innovative treatments that combined cutting-edge science with holistic principles. However, her career took a dramatic turn after a controversial clinical trial ended in tragedy. Rumors circulated that pharmaceutical companies had pressured her to abandon her research, fearing it would threaten profits. When she refused, they orchestrated a smear campaign, tarnishing her reputation and forcing her into exile. Ethan's heart ached as he read accounts of her struggle. No wonder she kept her past shrouded in secrecy. She'd been betrayed by the very system she sought to improve. Yet, rather than succumbing to bitterness, she channeled her pain into helping others, quietly saving lives without recognition or reward. The revelation deepened Ethan's admiration for Dr. Lin, but it also raised red flags. If powerful entities had targeted her before, could they do so again? Was his involvement putting him, and those he cared about, at risk? His suspicions were confirmed when anonymous letters began arriving at his doorstep. Written in blocky, impersonal text, they warned him to distance himself from the retreat's teachings. One note read, "You're playing with fire. Walk away while you still can." Fear crept into Ethan's mind, threatening to undermine his progress. What if the critics were right? What if he was jeopardizing his health and Liam's future for nothing? Facing fears. Determined not to let fear dictate his actions, Ethan confided in Dr. Lin during a phone call. Her response was calm yet firm. "They're afraid of change," she explained. "People cling to what they know, even when it harms them. Your willingness to challenge the status quo makes you a threat, but also a beacon of hope." Her words bolstered Ethan's courage. He realized that true healing required confronting not only physical ailments but also societal barriers designed to maintain the status quo. If he wanted to create lasting impact, he had to stand firm, even in the face of adversity. With renewed determination, Ethan announced plans to establish a research institute dedicated to studying integrative medicine. Funded partially by donations from workshop attendees and private investors, the project aimed to bridge gaps between conventional and alternative approaches, prioritizing patient-centered care above profit margins. He invited Dr. Lin to co-lead the initiative, vowing to expose systemic flaws while advocating for equitable access to holistic therapies. Though daunting, the decision sparked renewed public interest. Supporters rallied around Ethan, sharing their own experiences of overcoming illness through unconventional means. Skeptics doubled down on their attacks, labeling him a quack and a fraud. But Ethan no longer cared about pleasing everyone. His focus was clear: to inspire others to embrace possibility, even when odds seemed insurmountable. A new beginning. By the time construction on the Institute began, Ethan noticed profound changes within himself. Physically, he continued improving. His energy levels soared, and scans showed promising reductions in tumor size. Emotionally, he felt lighter, as though shedding decades of self-imposed limitations had freed him to live authentically. During a groundbreaking ceremony marking the start of construction, Ethan delivered a heartfelt speech, crediting his survival not only to medical interventions, but also to rediscovering joy, purpose, and human connection. Healing isn't just about surviving, he declared, his voice resonating with conviction. It's about learning to thrive, even in the face of uncertainty. As cameras flashed and applause erupted, Ethan locked eyes with Liam, who stood proudly beside him. In that moment, Ethan knew he found what truly mattered: love, resilience, and the unwavering belief that every life holds infinite potential. Because sometimes, the smallest spark of light can dispel the darkest shadows. The momentum behind Ethan's mission grew exponentially as word spread about his miraculous recovery and ambitious plans for the Research Institute. Media coverage intensified, painting him alternately as a visionary championing holistic health or a reckless advocate undermining traditional medicine. Supporters hailed him as proof that unconventional approaches could save lives. Critics dismissed him as a pawn in a dangerous game threatening established healthcare systems. Caught in the crossfire, Ethan found himself navigating uncharted territory, balancing the weight of public opinion with his unwavering commitment to change. Despite the mounting pressure, Ethan remained resolute. He knew the stakes were high, not just for himself, but for countless others who had been failed by conventional treatments. If his efforts succeeded, they could pave the way for a paradigm shift, empowering individuals to reclaim agency over their health and well-being. But if he faltered, the consequences would ripple far beyond his personal failure. They could discredit an entire movement. A night that changed everything. Ethan's resolve was put to the ultimate test during a charity gala celebrating his recovery and the launch of the Research Institute. Held in a grand ballroom adorned with glittering chandeliers and elegant floral arrangements, the event drew hundreds of attendees, from medical professionals and philanthropists to activists and skeptics eager to witness the spectacle firsthand. Cameras flashed incessantly, capturing every detail of Ethan's triumphant return to society. As he prepared to deliver his keynote speech, Ethan felt a mix of excitement and trepidation. The stage lights blinded him momentarily, and the murmurs of anticipation from the crowd buzzed in his ears. Taking a deep breath, he stepped forward, gripping the podium tightly as he scanned the sea of faces before him. "Thank you all for being here tonight," he began, his voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through his veins. "When I was diagnosed with terminal cancer, I thought my life was over. But instead of succumbing to despair, I chose to fight, not just for survival, but for something greater: hope." He paused, allowing his words to sink in. Around the room, guests leaned forward, captivated by his story. Encouraged by their attention, Ethan continued, "What I learned on my journey is simple yet profound. Healing isn't confined to hospitals or dictated by statistics. It's a process that begins within us, a choice to nourish our bodies, nurture our spirits, and connect with others authentically." His message resonated deeply, earning nods of agreement and murmurs of approval. Just as he reached the crescendo of his speech, however, chaos erupted. A group of protesters stormed the stage, shouting accusations and holding signs that read, "Pseudoscience kills," and "Stop endangering lives." Security guards rushed to intervene, but the damage was done. Reporters scrambled to document the scene, their cameras trained on Ethan as he stood frozen, unsure how to respond. For a brief moment, panic threatened to overwhelm him. But then, amidst the commotion, He spotted Liam sitting in the front row, his expression filled with pride rather than fear. Drawing strength from his son's unwavering support, Ethan raised his hands, signaling for calm. When the noise subsided slightly, he addressed the crowd once more. "I understand your concerns," he said evenly. "Change is scary, especially when it challenges what we've always believed. But clinging to fear won't save lives. Only openness to new ideas, new possibilities, can do that." His response silenced the room, leaving both allies and adversaries stunned. Though tensions lingered, the incident underscored the polarizing nature of Ethan's work, and the lengths to which opponents would go to discredit him. Unveiling the hidden key. In the days following the gala, Ethan retreated to the mountains, seeking solace at the retreat where his journey had begun. Dr. Lin greeted him warmly, sensing the turmoil brewing beneath his composed exterior. Together, they walked along familiar trails, discussing the events of the past week and reflecting on the path ahead. "You're close to unlocking it," Dr. Lin remarked cryptically as they paused beside a cascading waterfall. "The hidden key." Ethan frowned, recalling her earlier references to the mysterious concept. "What exactly are you talking about?" he asked, frustration creeping into his voice. "Is it some kind of metaphor? Or is there really a secret waiting to be discovered?" Dr. Lin smiled faintly, her gaze distant yet knowing. "It's not something I can give you," she explained. "You already have it. You just need to recognize it." Her words puzzled Ethan initially, but as they sat together in silence, surrounded by the soothing sounds of nature, clarity began to emerge. Over the course of his journey, he confronted fears, mended relationships, and embraced vulnerability. All qualities he previously avoided at all costs. Through these experiences, he cultivated resilience, gratitude, and compassion, not just for others, but for himself. Suddenly, it clicked. The hidden key wasn't a tangible object or a groundbreaking discovery. It was a mindset, forgiveness, the act of releasing guilt and shame. At unlocked doors he didn't even realize were closed. By forgiving himself for past mistakes, he'd created space for growth, connection, and renewed purpose. Tears welled in Ethan's eyes as the realization washed over him. "It's not about curing illness," he murmured, his voice trembling with emotion. "It's about living fully, no matter how much time we have left." Dr. Lin nodded approvingly, placing a gentle hand on his shoulder. "Exactly," she said softly. "And now it's your turn to share that truth with the world." Confronting the past. Returning to the city reinvigorated, Ethan threw himself into promoting the Institute's mission. He collaborated with Dr. Lin to develop educational programs emphasizing integrative approaches, ensuring participants understood the importance of balancing science with spirituality. Workshops focused on practical tools like nutrition, meditation, and journaling, while therapy sessions encouraged emotional exploration and self-compassion. At the same time, Ethan confronted lingering questions about Dr. Lin's controversial past. During a private meeting, she revealed details about the clinical trial that had derailed her career. Her research had shown promising results, combining chemotherapy with plant-based supplements to enhance efficacy and reduce side effects. However, pharmaceutical companies feared losing profits and pressured her to abandon the project. When she refused, they fabricated data suggesting her methods caused harm, leading to widespread distrust among peers and patients alike. Hearing her story ignited a fire within Ethan. Determined to expose the systemic flaws perpetuating such injustices, he partnered with investigative journalists to uncover evidence supporting Dr. Lin's claims. Their findings sparked outrage, prompting calls for accountability and reform within the healthcare industry. Though vindicated publicly, Dr. Lin remained humble, deflecting praise onto those whose lives she touched. "This isn't about me," she insisted during an interview. "It's about giving people the tools to heal themselves, in body, mind, and spirit." Her humility inspired Ethan to adopt a similar approach. Rather than positioning himself as a savior, he emphasized collective effort, urging others to join the movement and contribute their unique strengths. Together, they formed a coalition of advocates committed to challenging outdated paradigms and fostering equitable access to holistic care. Defining legacy. As months passed, Ethan's influence expanded beyond anything he imagined. Schools incorporated lessons on mental health and wellness into curriculums. Businesses implemented policies prioritizing employee well-being, and communities organized events celebrating kindness and connection. Even skeptics softened, acknowledging the value of addressing root causes rather than merely treating symptoms. Through it all, Ethan remained grounded, cherishing moments spent with Liam and Rachel. Their bond deepened significantly, built on shared laughter, heartfelt conversations, and mutual respect. Though scars from years of neglect still lingered, they no longer defined their relationship. Instead, they served as reminders of progress made and love restored. One evening, as Ethan strolled through the park where his journey had begun, he paused beneath the ancient oak tree. Its branches swayed gently in the breeze, casting dappled shadows across the ground. Turning to Liam, who accompanied him, he smiled warmly. "We've come a long way since that day," Ethan said softly, gesturing toward the sprawling roots anchoring the tree to the earth. "But there's still so much work to do." Liam nodded, returning his smile with quiet gratitude. "And we'll keep doing it, together." As they stood side by side, watching the sky shift from amber to indigo, Ethan felt a profound sense of peace. Though the fight was far from over, he knew they planted seeds of hope that would continue to grow long after they were gone. In a world hungry for light, even the smallest sparks could kindle extraordinary change. Because sometimes the smallest spark of light can dispel the darkest shadows. Years passed, and though the whirlwind of fame and controversy eventually subsided, the ripple effects of Ethan's work continued to shape lives across generations. The institute he co-founded, the Carter-Lynn Institute for Integrative Wellness, had grown into a global leader in patient-centered healthcare, its reach extending far beyond what Ethan could have imagined when he first set out on this journey. Yet, as time marched on, it became clear that no act of healing exists in isolation. Each one plants seeds that grow invisibly, nourished by love, courage, and resilience. For Ethan, the twilight years of his life were marked by quiet contentment rather than ceaseless activity. He slowed down significantly, allowing others to take the reins of leadership within the Institute while he focused on nurturing his own spirit. His garden remained his sanctuary, bursting with color even in the coldest months thanks to greenhouses he'd lovingly constructed with Liam's help. Neighbors often stopped by unannounced, bringing baked goods or simply sitting beside him as he tended to his flowers. These small moments reminded him that connection, the simplest yet most profound form of kindness, was what truly mattered. Liam, now a young man pursuing a career in public health, had become not only Ethan's greatest ally but also his closest confidant. Together, they shared laughter-filled memories, discussed challenges facing the Institute, and marveled at the unforeseen beauty of scars left behind. Rachel, too, remained a steady presence in their lives, her initial skepticism giving way to admiration as she witnessed firsthand the positive changes brought about by Ethan's efforts. Alex, meanwhile, found peace in ways he never thought possible. After recovering from his near-fatal plunge into the icy pond, he dedicated himself fully to advocacy work, becoming a respected voice for ethical practices in business and technology. He wrote extensively about his experiences, publishing not only the book Acts of Light, but also contributing articles to major publications worldwide. His transformation from disgraced entrepreneur to compassionate advocate served as living proof that redemption was always within reach, if one dared to seek it. Despite their differing paths, Maggie and Alex remained inseparable, bound by a bond deeper than friendship. They celebrated milestones together, the launch of new programs, the opening of community centers named after Maggie, and even the weddings of volunteers who'd met through the foundation. On quieter days, they revisited old haunts like the park where their journey began, sharing stories of how far they'd come and marveling at the unforeseen beauty of scars left behind. One crisp autumn morning, as golden sunlight filtered through the trees, Maggie sat on her porch sipping tea. A stack of letters lay beside her, penned by strangers whose lives had been touched by her kindness. Some thanked her for inspiring them to volunteer. Others shared tales of overcoming adversity because of her example. Each word carried weight, reminding her that even the smallest gestures could spark extraordinary change. As she read, Sarah approached, carrying a tray of freshly baked cookies. "Grandma," she said gently, "you've got another visitor." Maggie looked up, surprised. Over the years, visitors had dwindled as attention shifted elsewhere. But today, standing at the gate, was Claire, the woman who'd risked everything to expose corporate corruption. She looked older now, her hair streaked with gray, but her eyes still burned with determination. "May I come in?" Claire asked hesitantly, clutching a worn envelope. "Of course," Maggie replied warmly, gesturing toward the chair beside her. "It's good to see you again." Claire settled awkwardly, glancing around the cozy porch before speaking. "I wanted to thank you for everything. Because of you and Alex, My son's name has finally been cleared. The authorities reopened his case, and they formally acknowledged the role he played in exposing those crimes. Ears welled in Claire's eyes as she handed Maggie the envelope. Inside was a certificate of exoneration, a formal apology issued posthumously to Claire's son, recognizing him as a whistleblower instead of a scapegoat. Maggie held it reverently, understanding the magnitude of what this document represented, not just vindication for one family, but validation for all who fought against injustice. You did this, Maggie said softly, pressing the paper back into Claire's hands. Your bravery made it happen. Claire shook her head, smiling faintly. No, we did it, together. Without your movement, without your belief in doing what's right, none of this would have been possible. The encounter left Maggie reflective, stirring memories of the countless lives intertwined with hers through acts of kindness. That evening, as she tucked herself into bed, she pulled out an old journal gifted to her by Alex during his recovery. Flipping through its pages, she found entries documenting their struggles and triumphs, each one a testament to the power of perseverance. Inspired, she picked up her pen and began writing. To whoever finds these words someday, life will test you in ways you cannot predict. It will break you, bruise you, and leave you questioning whether any of it matters. But here's the truth. It does. Every act of kindness ripples outward, touching hearts and changing destinies long after we're gone. Do not underestimate the light you carry within you, for even the smallest flame can dispel the darkest shadows. She closed the journal, setting it aside with a satisfied sigh. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities to make a difference. But tonight, she allowed herself to rest, knowing she'd done all she could. Spring arrived, painting the world anew with vibrant blooms and renewed energy. The town buzzed with excitement over plans for a special event honoring Maggie's contributions. Organizers transformed the park into a celebration of kindness, erecting murals depicting her face alongside quotes from her speeches. Local artists performed songs inspired by her story, while children decorated benches with colorful handprints symbolizing unity. At the center of it all stood a young sapling planted in Maggie's honor, an oak tree destined to grow tall and strong, much like the legacy she created. Beneath it lay a plaque engraved with her favorite saying, "Even the smallest light can dispel the darkest shadows." On the day of the dedication ceremony, hundreds gathered to pay tribute. Alex delivered a heartfelt speech, recounting the journey they'd embarked upon together and emphasizing the importance of continuing their work. Maggie taught us that kindness isn't passive, he declared, his voice steady despite the lump in his throat. It's an action, a choice we make every single day, and if we keep choosing it, there's nothing we can't overcome. When it was Maggie's turn to speak, she stepped forward slowly, leaning on Sarah's arm for support. Though frail, her presence commanded silence, drawing every eye to her weathered but radiant face. I didn't set out to change the world, she began, her voice soft yet unwavering. All I wanted was to remind people of something simple, that everyone deserves to be seen, heard, and loved. If I'd done that, if I'd helped even one person feel less alone, then my life has been worthwhile. Applause erupted, echoing through the park as tears streamed down faces young and old. For many, Maggie wasn't just a figurehead. She was a symbol of hope, proving that age and circumstance couldn't diminish the power of compassion. In the weeks that followed, Maggie grew increasingly reflective, sensing that her time was drawing near. She spent her final days surrounded by loved ones, flipping through photo albums and sharing laughter-filled memories. One afternoon, as sunlight streamed through her bedroom window, she turned to Sarah with a serene smile. "Do you think anyone will remember me?" she asked quietly, her gaze drifting toward the garden visible beyond the glass. Sarah took her hand firmly, squeezing it reassuringly. "How could they forget? You changed the world, Grandma." Maggie chuckled softly, closing her eyes as sleep claimed her. When she passed away peacefully that evening, the entire town mourned her loss, but also celebrated her life, ensuring her memory lived on through the countless lives she touched. Years later, that oak tree planted in Maggie's honor towered majestically over the park, its branches sheltering picnickers, dreamers, and wanderers alike. Beneath it, a young girl knelt, placing a bouquet of wildflowers atop the plaque. Turning to her mother, she asked curiously, "Who was she?" Her mother smiled, brushing a strand of hair from the girl's face. She was proof that even the smallest acts of kindness can change the world. And so Maggie's legacy endured, not just in monuments or memorials, but in the hearts of those who continued spreading light wherever darkness lingered. Her story served as a reminder that kindness, though often unseen, carries immeasurable weight, and that every act, no matter how humble, has the potential to transform lives forever.